Tradition that is in the church today is tithing. Tithing was an Old Testament obligation that was placed on the Israelites under the law of Moses. They were required to support the Levites, who were the priests and had no inheritance of land. Behold, I have given the children of Levi all the tithes in Israel as an inheritance in return for the work which they perform, the work of the tabernacle of meeting. That's Numbers chapter 18, verse 21. That's where you get the commandment of tithing from. And then there are others that understand this commandment of tithing that was given to the Levites. So they go back to Genesis 14, when Abraham tithed his possessions to Melchizedek, his spoils of war. But from this example, you do not see a commandment or obligation to tithe. It was an example, yes. But today, many feel that tithing is an obligation. So where did it come from? There have been churches and pastors that have kicked members out of the church for not tithing. Some send letters to members telling that they are not properly keeping up with their tithe.
Simmons says he knows his aunt isn't the first person to receive a letter of removal for not tithing, and hopes this story will shed some light on the policy.
But the early church did not tithe. They gave willingly through offerings. There's nothing wrong with giving, but the doctrine of tithing today is not biblical. Today, tithing is generally defined as the 10th part of all fruits and profits justly acquired, owed to God in recognition of his supreme dominion over man, and to be paid to the ministers of the church. But the adoption of the doctrine of tithing from the law did not come from the early church, but Roman Catholic tradition. As the church expanded within the Roman Empire and institutions grew, it became necessary to make laws which would ensure the proper and permanent support of the clergy. The payment of tithes was adopted from the law of Moses. Over time, we see that the payment of tithes was made as an obligation for the church. It was a requirement. This was to support the organization of the church, but it was not a commandment of Elohim, but a tradition that men placed. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 7 says, "So let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for Elohim loves a cheerful giver." This is how the churches are to give, by what the Holy Spirit places on their heart, and not out of necessity. But man created the tradition to ensure that the church grew, removing the power of the Holy Spirit and placing their own tradition as the source. And over time, this tradition has been accepted. And now some of the worst churches ever created are growing exponentially because the church feels required to give rather than give by what is placed on their hearts. It's all about tradition.